Well, welcome to worship for this Ash Wednesday, and as we gather and think about what it means to prepare ourselves to enter into this season of Lent, this time of renewal, this time of growing in faith as we get together. Ash Wednesday is a strange day in the life of the church. As you think about what we focus on and what we talk about as we gather together on this day. You see, one of the things that we tend to like to do is we tend to like things neat and tidy, right? And we tend to like things organized and put together. You know, some of you know I have a little bit of anxiety, and I like to have a routine, right? I've got one place where I put my keys every day. I come in, and that's where I put my keys. Now, sometimes I'll walk in and I'll think, I'm smart, and I'm going to put them in this different spot. Doesn't work. That's exactly right, Sue. It doesn't work. And when I'm ready to leave, I'll spend 10 minutes tearing up the house looking for my keys, because I need that nice, neat, and ordered life. 2 years ago, this is one of the strangest Ash Wednesdays this year, but it's not the strangest, right? 2 years ago, the week prior to Ash Wednesday, this whole building had flooded, and I was leading Ash Wednesday worship from the back porch, streaming to all of you, because it was all we could do. No joke, this week, my house flooded. It's fine, it's all covered by insurance, but we had a little leak, and so right now, our whole house looks like the church did 2 years ago. Everything is in the living room and kitchen. All of our closet is out there, and it's not neat. And nothing is where it goes, right? We like stuff neat and tidy, and it's hard when stuff gets out of place, isn't it? It's hard when things aren't where they're supposed to be and people don't do what they're supposed to do. We kind of get drilled into us from the time we were young. I bet none of you, this was a regular occurrence for me, ever got in trouble coming home on a Sunday afternoon because you got home and you went out after church and you didn't change clothes first? And you're out playing in the dirt and the mud with your friends in your church clothes, right? And getting home and getting that lecture from mom about how those are not things you can get dirty. We like things neat and tidy. We like them sanitized and put together. And especially I think about this Wednesday. It's not Sunday, it's Wednesday. This Wednesday, I think about the reality that we do everything we can do to avoid talking about death. I invite you someday to go online to any of the funeral homes and start reading the obituaries and see how far they bend over backwards to not say the word dead or died. Right? He's gone to be with the Lord. She has passed on. They are asleep in the Lord. She went home. Lord, if you're a kid and you read that, it's going to scare the pants off you. I don't want to go to sleep. Grandpa went to sleep and you said he's never coming back. But we don't want to say the word dead or died. We want to keep it at a distance. And then we gather here on Ash Wednesday. We gather here on Ash Wednesday and we hear again and again these words of Ash Wednesday, the words that we gathered last week, or Monday. We celebrated the life of Ted Fedu at a graveside and said, as we stood over his casket, that all of us are mortal, formed of the dust of the earth, to dust we shall return. We gather here this night, and we hear those words addressed to each one of us. Whether we are 8 or 80 or anywhere in between, remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return. The world wants to do everything it can to avoid even thinking about, even mentioning death. And we gather here at the beginning of springtime when life is coming out in the world and green is growing, and we say, don't forget, we're all going to die. Remember, you are dust. To dust you shall return. I love to hear that story in Genesis, right? Story in Genesis 2, where God forms everything, and Genesis 2 is great, right? This is the God who walks in the garden in Genesis 2. God gets down in the dirt, and God reaches down and with God's hands plays in the mud. God plays in the mud. And God plays in the mud, and out of the mud and the dust and the dirt, out of the most ordinary stuff in the world, out of the stuff that we try and sweep out of our houses because it's everywhere and you can't get away from it, out of that, God forms us. And God breathes into us and gives us life. Remember that you are dust. There's so much in that. Remember that it is God who formed you and God who gave you the gift of life. Remember that all this stuff around us, the trees of the woodlands, the beautiful open spaces, the gardens in front of our houses, all of it is the same stuff as us. Remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And then this great story from Jesus might be my favorite healing of Jesus. It's in John chapter 9. And the story goes that Jesus is walking around and he sees a guy who was born blind. And the thought at the time was, who sinned, this man or his father or his parents? Somebody had to have done something wrong. Terrible things happen. You must have done something. Actions and consequences. Everybody assume that's the way that the world works. It's still often, we don't always say it out loud, but the way we assume the world works, right? What goes around comes around. God will take care of them. Who sinned? This man or his father? Surely those who live in poverty in our community, they just need to work harder, right? Who sinned? This man or his father? Surely those who have gotten sick, they just shouldn't take so many risks with their lives, right? That guy who got into the accident at 2 a.m, he must have been drinking. Who sinned? This man or his father? We don't say it out loud, but it's there. We have this same thought that when bad things happen, it must be because you deserved it. Unless it happens to us. And Jesus cuts into that, and I love this passage because as some of you know, I'm a great big geek. And this is one of those passages where often the way that it's been read is wrong. Right? Jesus says, as we read, neither he nor his parents sinned, but he was born blind so that we can show the glory of God, say some translations. God made him blind. That's why I like the translation we use, the CEB. It says, much better, and right, remember, some of you who are in Bible study with me, that punctuation and stuff doesn't show up in our Bibles for 800 years after it's written, right? So the answer is, who sinned, this man or his father? Jesus says, neither, period. He was born blind, period. It happens. Life is messy. Life isn't neat and ordered. The keys aren't always where they should be. Sometimes there's a leak. Who sinned, this man or his parents? And Jesus answered, neither. Life is messy. Neither. It happens. Again, as we gathered with Kathy and her family on Monday, it was not more than 2 weeks after Ted first went into the hospital. Think about that for a minute. He went in on a Saturday, and he died on a Saturday. A week. It happens, says Jesus. Life is messy. And God never pretends it's not supposed to be. God never pretends that our lives are going to be neat and ordered and happen the way that we expect them to happen. That's what we gather and affirm here on Ash Wednesday, that things don't always go the way that we planned. And it's not your fault, and it's not the other guy's fault, and it's not your parents' fault, and it's not your kid's fault, and it's not your pastor's fault. It just happens sometimes. The world is broken and messy and muddy. God knew it, and God walked in the garden. God got God's hands dirty in the mud. And Jesus walked along and saw the mess of the life. And we've seen Jesus heal before in the Gospels, right? Sometimes he doesn't even have to be there. Another time somebody comes up to Jesus and says, my kid is sick. And Jesus says, go home, they're fine. He didn't have to go see him. But this time, Jesus gets down on the ground and spits in the mud. Spits in the dirt and makes this gross, nasty mess. Covers the guy's face with it. Don't you wonder what was going through his head as he felt this slick, slimy dirt? His disciples' heads in a society where spitting was a sign of disgrace. And Jesus said, life is messy and muddy and gross and ew. Always look when I leave something out of a reading. Chapter 9 is a great reading, and I cut out the middle. But if you go back and read the middle of chapter 9 in this story, the guy is healed, and then he gets kicked out. The people say, we don't believe you. Said, this guy who plays in the mud has got to be a fake. You must be lying. And they kick him out. And after they kick him out, because not just our bodies sometimes broken, but our relationships and our communities are broken, and the very people we ought to embrace we sometimes kick out. And Jesus goes and he chases after the one who got kicked out, not the people who did the kicking. Chases after the one who got kicked out. And embraces him and calls him beloved in the midst of the mud and the mess. Jesus answered, neither. He was born blind, but we must do the works of the one who sent me. It always amazes me on Ash Wednesday as we gather together and we talk about, and you're going to hear about the practices of Lent, the fasts and the self-denial, the prayers and the study of the Bible, the worship and the celebration of communion and the sacraments that we share in. Let's be clear though, right? Like Lent, this season that we're entering into, is not God's diet plan, right? It's not stopping eating chocolate so that I can lose some weight. It's not going on more walks so that I can look better and feel better about myself. The people in Isaiah that he was responded to asked the same questions. What does it look like to worship God in the way that God desires? God says, this is the fast, this is the spiritual discipline. These are the works of the one who sent Jesus. Release the wicked restraints and untie the burdens of oppression. Break every yoke. Go share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house. Cover the naked. Remove the oppressive burden from your neighbor. For if you open your heart to the hungry and provide abundantly for the poor, hope will shine through the despair. That's what Jesus does. That's what Jesus does again and again in his ministry and what he calls us to. Not to saying the right prayers, not to being in church at the right times, even if it's Ash Wednesday and you'd rather be at home watching your favorite shows. Not to reading enough of the Bible, but we are called to the spiritual disciplines of loving those that the world has forgotten. The ones born blind from birth. The ones who seem like it might even be their fault. Who sinned, this man or his father? Neither, says Jesus. God formed us from the dust and the mess of the earth. God gave us the gift of life. If ever we find ourselves looking down the nose of someone else, remember, dear friend, that you are dust. We are all dust. Remember that God has come to you in the midst of the mess of your life. Remember that God has come to bring healing and wholeness in the midst of the brokenness and the mess of your life and your world. You see, we are dust, and our lives are messy, and our lives don't go the way that we plan, and things don't unfold the way that we would like. But the good news of Ash Wednesday is that God never stops playing in the mud. God never stops bringing new life out of the mess, bringing healing in the midst of the blindness, bringing wholeness in the midst of the brokenness. Remember, you are dust. Remember, you are mud, spit and dirt. And God is not done with you. Amen.